Hello everyone, this is Bill Griffin. Welcome to Different Take Podcast. Today I'd like to share my thoughts on the shutdowns that occurred in March 2020 and whether or not that's a good idea for the inevitable next pandemic that comes down the road. So I'd like to do this by discussing the logic that you would think would be applied to this decision looking back, and then what the reality of the situation was and is. And at the end, I want to show you a video of some people that aren't Republicans or Democrats. They're not political at all, but in my opinion, they will never go for another shutdown that we saw in the United States, but also in many places around the world. So this headline is out of the National Review. It was published on February 1, 2022. The headline reads, John Hopkins analysis, lockdowns should be rejected out of hand. So this was picked up in many news outlets and internet sites, but not by the major left-wing media outlets. The title of this study is called A Literature Review and Meta-Analysis of the Effects of Lockdowns on COVID-19 Mortality. They are saying that the lockdowns did nothing, would make zero impact, and should never be used again. So I want to go back in time to when this March 20 and even before. There's this conventional wisdom that exists that public health experts were universally in favor of these lockdowns. That is not true at all. There are a number of public health experts. It's very easy to find this information across the world that thought that lockdowns were not a good idea. This is from February 1, 2020. This is Dr. Amesh Adalja. This is on Fox News Channel interview in February 1, 2020.
That is very important. I do not think that the travel bans are warranted. I do not think that the quarantines are warranted. I do think we need to monitor and screen people as they come in and educate them about the symptoms, but this is going to end up being a community-transmitted virus, and the severity is not going to be what we were seeing in China. It's going to fall substantially. As we understand, there are more asymptomatic cases, there are more cases with very mild symptoms, and it's really only a small number that are going to get severe disease or require hospitalization or ICU care or even die, and I think that will change the risk perception of this virus as time goes on.
Note, he does not qualify this statement that quarantines are not warranted. Even travel bans are not warranted. He doesn't qualify this with, well, this could change in the future. Now, he may have changed his opinion on this, I don't know. But at that point in time, he is not in favor of lockdowns. Here's another expert. His name is Johan Gesicki. He's Swedish, former Swedish the head Swedish epidemiologist, and also he's with the World Health Organization. And this is an interview that he did in March 2020, same topic.
Like border closures, school closures, social distancing, there's almost no science behind most of these. So
he is saying this was the shutdown ideas were an experiment. There's no evidence to support doing this, and that he suspects this is going to be a very bad idea. And of course, Sweden did not engage in these shutdowns. There's, as I said, there's a lot of public health experts that were in alignment with this view, but left-wing media, they did not entertain this, the contrary viewpoint to this. If you do an internet search of John Hopkins shutdown policy, you'll quickly come up with articles that poo-poo this study that came out February 1, 2022. This is a Newsweek article. It's titled, "Did a Johns Hopkins Study Prove Lockdowns Don't Work? What We Know So Far." This is published on February 7th. This is only a few days after the National Review article came out. It's by Yevgeny Kuklichev. And in this, if you go through this, he's made several observations, I suppose, that this study was not peer-reviewed. It questions methodology, and he interviews people that take issue with this study. He interviews, so he quotes Seth Flaxman, who is associated with the London Imperial College, and Neil Ferguson. This is Seth Flaxman. "This study is flawed in numerous ways and its conclusions are wrong." This is from Seth Flaxman. Neil Ferguson is a public health expert that has been is prominent in the UK for many years. He has made several terrible predictions that did not come to pass in his career. He predicted tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of deaths from mad cow disease. That didn't happen. There was something like 37 or something. The bird flu, he predicted millions and millions of deaths across the world, and it was less than, I think, 200. Whether I have those numbers exactly right aren't important. He was wildly, wildly wrong. So check this, going back in time just to see, check the credibility of Neil Ferguson and Seth Flaxman. They were responsible for a model that was used in this clip.
That this begins in the middle and the end with community. It is community and the community of the American people that are going to have to do the things for the next 30 days to make a difference. I think you know from that large blue mountain that you can see behind me, and I just want to thank the 5 or 6 international and domestic modelers from Harvard, from Columbia, from Northeastern, from Imperial, who helped us tremendously. It was their models that created the ability to see what these mitigations could do, how steeply they could depress the curve from that giant blue mountain down to that more stippled area.
So Deborah Birx refers to the Blue Mountain, something like 2.2 million deaths, but it's going to be reduced to 200,000 deaths at most. That was the top of those graphs. The worst case scenario. This is all going to happen in 2020. This is wildly, wildly inaccurate. This Johns Hopkins study says that that curve would be the same. There wouldn't be a Blue Mountain, and it's just one line. In this Newsweek article, there's so many problems with this line of this logic because he's using people that have a history of being wrong, and they were wrong in this case, and he does not present a refuting study. He fails to recognize that shutdowns were an experiment. He offers no proof that these lockdowns were effective. And the big problem, I think, is there's no discussion of whether the benefits outweigh the cost. There's cost to the shutdown that occurred around the world, and this is not covered in this article. So you would hope that politicians would approach this decision, whether to impose lockdowns or not, would revolve around logic. They don't, but let's just assume, how would you go about this logically? Well, you know there's an experiment. You know that some public health experts are in favor of this strategy. You know that many public health experts aren't. They're more concerned about just the public health perspective regarding the virus spread, not the cost of the shutdowns. They're not concerned with that. So you know this. And when you think about trying to weigh the benefit and the cost, you would want to know, where are there contrary opinions? Would you do research on that? And then at the end of the day, you would probably come to the conclusion that you really don't know. Because if you use a burden of proof, say the preponderance of evidence standard, you'd come to the conclusion that you don't know. There's too many unknown factors. You cannot make a good decision. So in that case, you would logically not do anything. That's the logic. The reality is that's not what happens. That's a sort of maybe a dream world. Or what was happening is you have a drumbeat to impose these lockdowns. And there's several reasons for this. Politicians are not concerned about really, I mean, some of them may be. They're concerned when they do a cost-benefit analysis. It has to do with, how do I get credit for the good things and how do I avoid blame for the bad things? That's how they approach things. When this broke in February, March 2020, the left-wing media had a huge interest in promoting these shutdowns. If you are stuck at home, you will watch more television. This story completely suited their political agenda. And when you have a fearful audience, you generally have a captive audience. They don't say in the journalism business, if it bleeds, it leads, for no reason. So that's the reality. Politicians such as Gavin Newsom, I would assume, this is just my opinion, that he probably views this methodology, avoid blame, get credit, as necessary to do the people's work. He can't, if he's not doing that, that's his job. And all good things will come from it. There's also this, if you go through social media and also the reports on left-wing media, when people express their opinions about the lockdowns and the other restrictions as well, but I'm focusing on lockdowns, the answer to people that disagree with these things is, well, show me your data. Well, it's logically, it should be the politician's job or the government's job to prove to the people that they rule over that the benefits of shutdown outweigh the costs, not the other way around. So when you have this back and forth with people that were pro shutdown and anti-lockdown, that's the go-to. Well, you don't care about your fellow man, and you have no data to support your conclusion, which is as I said, is the opposite. I would hope and expect that politicians prove their case that these things are necessary. But that is not the reality. The reality is politicians and government bureaucrats painted this, in the left-wing media, painted this picture that everyone was in agreement on these measures. People often forget how these lockdowns came about. Where I live, it started with the cities. I live in Gwinnett County, Georgia. It started with the cities. They imposed shutdown or lockdowns on restaurants, and then that moved to the county, imposed a countywide shelter-in-place order, and then the state jumped in. So this happened from the local governments up to the state governments, and the federal government really had no say in these. It was primarily the states that imposed these lockdown measures. Many of them were lauded for it. Andrew Cuomo was lauded for this. So this is a video of the Gwinnett County, Georgia chairman of the county commission. Her name is Charlotte Nash. So I'd like you to listen to this.
we have made the decision to issue a stay-at-home order that outlines additional steps that are expected from both residents and businesses. These steps are intended to slow the spread of COVID-19 in order to give our hospitals, healthcare workers, and first responders the best chance to handle caseloads that will grow rapidly over the next.
So this person, Charlotte Nash, states categorically that the caseload will grow rapidly, the hospitals will be filled, and that these steps are necessary. She was dead wrong about this. The hospitals were not empty here. The hospitals were empty. They were not filled up at all. People were afraid to go to the hospital, and hospitals did not want, they were fearful of having patients come in. So they were, many floors of hospitals were empty. In some cases around the country, remember, nurses and healthcare workers were furloughed because there weren't any patients. Many people will probably die from cancer because they didn't know that they don't know that they have cancer, and this will happen over a length of time. It won't just happen. Those kind of things don't happen very fast. They give you an idea of how cavalier I think that this Charlotte Nash took this situation. In a press release, she called the lockdown measures temporary sacrifices. Well, many of these things were very damaging to people, and she does not recognize this. It does not seem to recognize this at all. There's no apology later. There's no case being made later that this was a good idea. There's no recognition. I'll put it this way. There's assumption on her part that this was necessary, it was a good idea, and they should be used again and again and again. That's the only, when you're silent about something so important, that's the only message that the people can get from it. That's the reality. People were afraid, and these decisions were made based on, not based on logic, but based on other factors. So I'd like you to check out this next video. It's a group of people that are not political. They are not Democrats. They are not Republicans. And in my opinion, they will never, ever go for another lockdown the rest of their lives. So I'd like you to check this out.
Starting tomorrow, we don't have to wear masks anymore! Is anybody excited?
So you may be thinking, well, what does mask have to do with shutdowns? Well, think about it. If shelter-in-place orders are ever passed when the next inevitable virus comes along, and it's such a great idea to do these shutdowns, masks have to be a part of it. And I think as these people grow up, they're going to be very resentful of the adults as they learn more and more about this, that they imposed this miserable last 2 years that they had to wear masks. You don't see children display this level of elation. Oh, we're having cookies today. You just don't get that kind of jubilation for that. In my opinion, that's a sign that the last 2 years were incredibly trying. And just think about when they look back and the amount and the number of times they were apologized to. I'm sorry you have to wear your mask, but you have to protect your grandmother and all of that sort of thing. I just don't think they're going to look at this and say, oh, 25 years from now or 20 years from now, when these folks are having children, that they're going to put their children through the thing that they went through. I just don't see it. This might be one of the worst things that Democrats have ever done, because this has kind of become very political. Democrats like the lockdowns and Republicans didn't, and that was kind of where swords are drawn. The idea that these kids are going to grow up and they're going to have fond memories of wearing masks for 2 years is ridiculous. Many children will probably resent their parents for not protecting them. If you're a parent and you're in, obviously have that happen. That happens often without this extra business with the mask and so forth. So it's just not a good situation for parents. And I know they're in a tough place because you want to educate your children. Some of these children will grow up and resent the adults around them for not protecting them, especially the politicians. It seems pretty obvious to me that that's what's going to happen. You just don't see this kind of reaction from children. So when you compare the places that locked down to the places that didn't, for example, the state of New York, Stockholm, Sweden, is there a statistical difference? This study that I referred to at the beginning says that lockdowns made no difference. But when you look at these places, is there a statistical difference? Well, Anthony Fauci's of the world do not tell you that there's a statistical difference, and you would think if there is, they would say so. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think we all know someone that has passed away in the past 2 years. They passed away testing positive for COVID, but unfortunately they were at the end of their life for other reasons, and but they're chalked up as a COVID-19 death, rather than this number being undercounted. You would have to assume that it's overcounted, and then by how much, and those numbers are going to come out. And then the last thing when it comes to lockdowns is do the benefits outweigh the costs? I think the only way that lockdowns will not occur when the next pandemic comes along is that the public widely accepts that the Anthony Fauci's of the world were charlatans, and they were dead wrong, and they imposed a lot of harm unnecessarily on the world population. So that's my assessment of this, and I'm sure many people will disagree. If you disagree, I'd love to hear from you. Any comments? We'd like to see that. And thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. Check out our website, the other platforms that we're on, and please subscribe. And thank you.